Thank you, Nikolai. Skip, thank you so much for having me. This is quite an honor to come here to speak with you all tonight, and I thought I would just kind of share my story about being a cook in New Orleans and what that meant before Katrina and what that means now after Katrina. And, you know, it's a story that you really can't make up. It's one of these things that, like, you kind of have to live through to figure out where you stand in your community and what you can provide to your community. And I thought it was really interesting that, like, we would be here. The School of Public Service is just a perfect platform to kind of talk about what what opportunities Katrina was really able to provide. Like Nikolai said, I was born in Israel, grew up in Philadelphia, really just started cooking with my mother and my grandmother at a very young age, and eventually, by the time I was 10 years old, I was cooking out of necessity because my mother worked 2 jobs, and I was pretty much the chef of the house. I had to cook dinner and get things ready when she came home at 8 o'clock at night or so. I'd have everything all prepped up, or food would be ready, and I would have already eaten dinner a long time ago. And so really cooking for me was a necessity at a young age, and I just kept at it, and it was something that I never stopped doing. I always loved it, and I never look at food now as a job. I look at food as my entire life. I look at it as everything that I know, everything that I've done, everything that I'm going to do. And when you think about cooking, the essence of what cooking is, it's serving. It's creating something for people to have, for people to share, that sustains them. And, you know, as a cook, as a chef, that's your job. Your job is to provide people with substance. And I realized that at a pretty young age, and it always made me happy. I love to make something and give it to somebody and watch them smile. I couldn't imagine, like, researchers or accountants, like, all play very important roles, but, like, you do something and then, you know, a year later, somebody taps you on the back and says, "Great job, thank you." I kind of need that immediate satisfaction. And most cooks do. That's the kind of people that you find cooking in restaurants, or people that, you know, live off of that immediate gratification. And that's kind of what gets us through working in hot kitchens all day long. And so I got to New Orleans in 2003 through a friend, started cooking with John Besh, who is a very well-known chef down there and has been on Food Network multiple times. And he provided me with this opportunity to live out a dream of mine, and that was to open an Italian restaurant. And I'd always wanted to do that. We had all these plans to make it happen, and then the storm came through called Katrina. And that kind of put everything on the back burner. At that point, when Katrina hit, life automatically became not a question of what am I going to do next. It was a question of what can I do next? What can I do for people now in this time of need? When there's people all around you that need something just to live, what could I provide? And it came back to cooking. You know, I could go and help rebuild a house and pick up a hammer and a nail, but I'm sure that house wouldn't last very long, and somebody would probably get poked with a nail when they turned over in their sleep one night. I figured, like, I was good at cooking, and so that's what I was going to do and just stick to it. And so we were there just a couple days after Katrina, cooking red beans and rice for people on the street. And we drove in from Alabama. We had friends in North Mississippi. We had friends in Texas. And they all really just kind of came together. We got an ice machine sent down from Tunica, Mississippi. We had barrels and barrels of gasoline brought over from Texas. We had one of the casinos in northern Mississippi gave us all of the rice and red beans that they had in their storeroom, and that filled up a rental truck full. And so we kind of just drove into town, John and I, as like these, I don't know, these like missionaries. We wanted to, come in and give things to people. And so we came in and just started cooking red beans and rice in his driveway, and coming up with these big steaming pots of red beans and rice, and we would put tons of Tabasco sauce in there to keep people awake and so they could keep rebuilding and cleaning up. And we would put all that in the back of a swamp boat, this little flat-bottomed duck hunting boat, and drive that from his house to a hospital where all the doctors and nurses would come out, get a quick bowl of hot food, and then head back in, and they'd bring some to their patients that were able to eat it. And that was like it was really at that moment in this parking lot of a hospital that I felt really like, I was able to really contribute something. And you think about, what money can I donate? Where can I go and to an auction and buy something for money that will go to somewhere? And that's so important. But rarely, I think, do people have an opportunity in life where they can really make something with their hands and right away give it to somebody and see that you've helped somebody just like that. And it goes back to what I got into this business for in the first place, because I enjoyed making people happy. And so then when you can take that and translate it to really helping people, it was a beautiful thing. And it was really at that moment that I made a personal decision to make it part of my life, to constantly find a way to give back. And so really, living through Katrina was one of the hardest times of my life, and it all came down to just having to work my butt off to cook for people that really didn't have any way of getting hot food on a regular basis. People were eating MREs, which stands for Meals Ready to Eat, which is what they eat out like in the combat zones in Afghanistan. And I thought, like, this is some of the worst stuff I've ever tasted in my life. Like, I can't believe these people are out there risking their lives eating this stuff. So one day I want to try to invent some really good meal that I can give to our troops. But we looked for ways that other than, so like after about a week in New Orleans, the government realized that, oh man, we better get down there and actually do something. So we kind of got pushed out from a vigilante standpoint, from like being there. There was really no room for us at that point to cook and give food to people because there was such a huge influx of government officials there cooking and setting up catering trucks. So we then looked at what else can we do, and there was a little fried chicken place in the Tremay neighborhood called Willie Mae's Scotch House. And Willie Mae is, at the time, she was 89 years old. She had been frying chicken at this little place all her life. And it started out as a Scotch house, as a bar. And eventually in the early 50s grew to a restaurant and became one of the epicenters for the civil rights movement in the 60s, where people would go there and meet and have meetings about how is this movement going to go forward. So Willie Mae is just the sweetest old lady, and her restaurant was crushed. I mean, it was just completely covered in mold, stunk to high heaven. There was, I could have sworn there was something dead within a block or so of the restaurant. And we would go, there was the group of the Southern Foodways Alliance out of Oxford, Mississippi. That it's this group that's made up of chefs and foodies and restaurateurs from around the South. And they had come to help rebuild Willie Mae's Scotch House. And so they came with the hammers and the nails and started really putting this place back together. John and I came and set up, if you could just picture this devastated neighborhood. Flies were everywhere, trash was everywhere, and a group of people hammering away at this restaurant, and we had set up about 6 8-foot tables with white tablecloths, silver chafing dishes, carving lamps, and we were doing barbecue shrimp and 45-day dry-aged, not wet-aged, dry-aged New York strip that we were slicing. We had like truffled mashed potatoes and crab meat, and we were just cooking the most amazing food on the sidewalk. We had one person in charge of just making sure the flies didn't get near us. And we were feeding the people that were there to help rebuild Willie Mae's Scotch House. And that was like another one of those awakening moments where I was like, man, this feels good. Like, this is so important. And never did I think when I was cooking for my mom back in the day that I would ever able to really influence something and make a difference through food. And so we would show up there every day and cook lunch for these guys. And I'd bring Miss Willie Mae a bottle of Manischewitz wine. If any of you guys know, that's like the ceremonial Jewish wine. That's really nasty stuff. It's made out of the Concord grape, which is the same thing that I think Welch's uses. And so we'd show up, and I'd give her a bottle of Manischewitz, because that was really her favorite thing. And she'd sit there and sip on her Manischewitz as we were cooking and they were rebuilding. And, you know, it was a series of events like that after Katrina that were just really special. And I look back at it and I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really to help rebuild a city from scratch. Eventually, we were able to get Restaurant August back up and running, and that was John's flagship restaurant. We worked day and night, around the clock, cooking at this restaurant, reopening it, and we were slammed. Hundreds of people would come every single day to eat at the restaurant. We were one of the few places that were open, and the restaurant then became this community table. Imagine your city is destroyed. You come back from wherever you evacuated to find your house with 4 to 8 feet of water and all of your belongings just completely devastated. And you spend all day in your house with a surgical mask on, gutting it out, going through your belongings, finding old photos, throwing away things that you've cherished your entire life. And that was all you really had to do every day. I mean, that was what people did for hours every day. And so when the restaurants in New Orleans started to reopen, those were the community centers. Those were the places that people would say, I'm taking a break from this, I'm taking this damn surgical mask off, and I'm going to go and get some food and sit with my neighbors who were going through the exact same thing that they were going through. So it was John, myself, and one other chef in the kitchen cooking for, I would say, I think it was about 300 people a day that we were doing. And everybody would come, and typically in restaurants we're used to, you know, send out some food, people come, they eat, they drink, they leave, and then more people come. But we would cook, and people wouldn't get up. Like, nobody wanted to leave. So we ended up, like, being really busy for just a short amount of time and then kind of sitting there waiting for somebody else to come, and people never wanted to leave their tables because it was their chance to escape reality. And so we did that for a while. And then I remember the first day that somebody complained that we didn't have valet parking. And that was kind of like, okay, things are getting back to normal. Like, things are moving along. This is a good sign. And they were mad because we didn't have like foie gras on the menu. And we were like, okay, we got to find a way to get foie gras. And slowly but surely, cooks started coming back, and things kind of started feeling normal again. Though it was tough because we had no money. Being closed for a month and still having to pay the bank rent. It was a tough time financially for any restaurant owner. So then we just stayed open longer and worked harder and fed as many people as we could. And at first you kind of even felt bad charging people money, but it came down to, like society has to come back and we have to pay our bills, and people want to spend the money. They just want a place to go and eat. And since then, I think as a company, we spend now about $1 million a year in cooking for charitable events around the city. Not only are there more organizations that need money in New Orleans after Katrina, or that need things donated, but I think it kind of was a calling to us to say, here, we have to continue this. The way that we felt so good after Katrina by providing people with something so important as a hot meal can go on. And so now we do that on a very regular basis. And there are so many wonderful people out there that came from all over the country that really helped New Orleans get back on its feet. And still to this day, it's you see people coming down and rebuilding churches and rebuilding homes in neighborhoods that still haven't recovered since Katrina. And there's still a lot of that going on. So then eventually we get back up and running. It was about 2 years after Katrina that I told John, look, remember that dream about the Italian restaurant that I told you a while back? And he goes, great, move to Italy, come back, and we'll partner up together and open up a restaurant. And so that's what I did. As Nikolai said, I went to Italy and just slaved away for a year, eating and drinking and cooking my way through that country. And really, for me, it was a dream come true being out there. I came back. We partnered up in Dominica, and we've been open now for close to 3 years. It'll be 3 years in September. And you'll see Dominica at all the auction tables around town, giving away gift certificates to come eat at the restaurant. I spend a lot of time now working with children in schools, cooking with them in their classrooms. We have an edible schoolyard at one of our schools that provides elementary school students and middle school students a chance to learn through growing. And they have a community garden, and they grow vegetables and raise chickens and harvest eggs, and all that's worked into the curriculum of what they do every day. And it teaches kids that you still have to do some manual labor and work to get something out of in life. And here's how you can plant a garden and feed your family and not have to take them down the road to the fast food restaurant for lunch or for dinner. And so I spend a lot of my time now focusing on those initiatives around the city, and I love it. It's become more than I could have ever imagined it would. When you were watching CNN and seeing New Orleans underwater, you thought that nothing good could come out of that. And for a while, nothing did, other than good people that really showed their hearts and came down there and helped. But now I think that there's been a lot of people that have been reawakened from a public service standpoint to say, I'm a part of this community and I got to really do something to help this community, versus just writing a check or showing up at a fancy party that goes to charity. It really takes more than that. And that's what I learned from Katrina. And that's what I now try to instill in my cooks and the people that I work with every day, to give back, to do something to give back to the community. So I take it upon myself to just schedule them to go do those things. And they come back happy and feeling fulfilled that they were able to contribute. So that's my Katrina story. I'd love to, if anybody has any questions. It's a Dominica restaurant, and it's at the bottom of the Roosevelt Hotel, right in the Central Business District, off of Canal and Burron Street. And it's regional Italian food. It's really, the restaurant's kind of like a diary of my travels through Italy and where I went and what I ate. And now the menu kind of reflects those experiences.
All right, let's wait for the microphones. You got one right here. Then we'll.
I have two short questions. The first one is something I've always been intrigued about, and since you are the head chef at one of the country's best known Italian restaurants, New Orleans is known for Creole food. I love cooking. It's known for its taste on French cooking, yet there's a strong Italian culture in food there that's not necessarily reflected in tourist neighborhood maps. I'd love you to comment about where the Italian influence in New Orleans, how it came about, because I never have understood that. It's there. Casamento is one of my favorites of all time. And the second question is, I'm going to Philadelphia, and so as a Jewish man from Philadelphia, where do I go to get good Italian food? Where would you recommend me to go?
I got good answers for both of those questions. The first one is in Sicily, right after World War II, Italy was just in pretty bad shape, and Sicily was a very, very poor part of Italy. And so ships of Italian immigrants arrived at the port of New Orleans in huge numbers. And up until the late 1800s, New Orleans had the largest Italian population in the country, even more than New York. So the Italians really influenced New Orleans in many ways. They took over a lot of their produce markets, and where the Germans came and actually grew the vegetables, the Italians sold the vegetables. They also started dealing the imports of bananas and coffee that came up from Central America into New Orleans. And so if you look at a lot of like the people that I still buy from today, Piazza Seafood, Cusimano Produce, Angelo Bricato's Gelato, there's a lot of still influence of Italian culture in New Orleans today, though the French and the Spaniards were able to bring more money to New Orleans and able to I think influence it more through architecture and business. The Italians really knew how to kind of wheel and deal the markets, and that's kind of how they put their stamp on New Orleans. And up until recently, the food's been all just kind of red gravy, this mesh of American, Italian, Southern Italian American cuisine. And Dominica, I think, was one of the first restaurants to kind of change that and say, look, Italy is more than just, cannelloni and lasagna. There's more to it. And so we started cooking different types of roasted meats and all kinds of fresh pastas, and that's kind of, I think, why people have grasped onto it so well, because it was something new. Even though what we do at Dominica is not new, It just doesn't exist. It just didn't exist in New Orleans, but it comes from centuries of tradition in northern Italy. Your second question, Philadelphia is a great food town. Mark Vetri is one of the most amazing chefs in the country, and he has several Italian restaurants. One's called Vetri, which is a very fancy one. Another one's called Osteria, which is kind of like Dominica, casual, fun, really beautiful ingredients and interesting menu. He's got a little Roman trattoria called Amis, and he just opened this bar, like this beer on tap place called Alla Spina, all in Philly. So if you just Google Mark Vetri, you will eat good Italian food. And he's a Jewish Italian from Philly that cooks great Italian food as well. So there's a big connection there.
Question. We got one at the back here, Laura.
Thank you for being here. My name is Laura Crosby, and I'm a first-year student here at the Clinton School. And as someone who, several years after Katrina, you spoke about how you continue to give back to the city. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the ways that restaurants can more directly put public service into their philosophy and their mission. I know of one example in New Orleans, Reconcile Cafe in Central City, which is a nonprofit organization training individuals in that neighborhood to go into the restaurant business and be servers and chefs, and to help get jobs in the city and help bring people back to the city, which is still struggling to recover after Katrina.
Sure. So Cafe Reconcile is a running restaurant. It has servers, it has cooks, it's open for lunch and dinner every day, and it's all the entire staff is run by at-risk youth. It's run by kids from inner city New Orleans that don't have much of an opportunity outside of, they really don't have much of an opportunity at all. So Reconcile kind of, they apply to Reconcile, and they'll take them on, and they'll learn how to cook, they'll learn how to serve, and they'll learn a skill, because many of them come from homes where they're not really getting a lot of family support. If you've been to Dominica or are coming to Dominica, all of your hand-rolled pasta is made by Miss Angel, who is a graduate of Cafe Reconcile. And you know, what restaurants, to answer your questions, what can restaurants do to more directly influence public service? I think the easy answer to that is hire people out of programs like Cafe Reconcile and give them full-time jobs and help to continue that support for the community. Also, going out and working with places like Edible Schoolyard. And I know I've done several cooking demos at Cafe Reconcile. There's another place called Liberty's Kitchen, which is pretty much the same type of organization. And so it's really up to the chefs and the restaurant owners to get out there and be in that community and provide these kids with something. As a running business, you have to find ways to share your passion with the rest of the community. And cooking with places like Cafe Reconcile is one of the ways that you'll see a lot of chefs, I think not enough, but a lot of the chefs in New Orleans go and participate in those cooking demos and do hire people from that program. So that's a start.
Joanne, right here. Wait for the microphone, Joanne.
How many people do you seat in Dominica? And do you have a dream to open another restaurant? And if so, would it be Italian?
Well, we seat 150 people at Dominica. I do have dreams to open another restaurant. I have a couple dreams. Whether or not they'll ever come to reality, I don't know. But one of them is to open up some pizzerias, because I worked for a pizzaiolo, a pizza master in Italy, and just fell in love with the art of pizza making. And I'd love to open up a string of like gourmet pizzerias one day. Another thing I'd like to do is open up a restaurant that really reflects my roots of Israeli cuisine and Middle Eastern cuisine. And I think one day I'd like to kind of explore that option and open up every town has their Middle Eastern restaurant where they get their hummus and baba ganoush and pita bread. But there aren't many of those restaurants in this country that really go out there and do a great job at sourcing local ingredients and making pita bread to order. And so those are the kinds of dreams that I have. Hopefully one day they'll come to light. If you come and be a customer, that would help.
Yep. Joel?
During your sojourn in Italy, did you find a particular region that you really enjoyed traveling through? And what was your favorite dish or your favorite dish to remember from that region?
That's a tough question. Well, I didn't do much traveling unless my beautiful wife, Emily, would come and visit. When she came, we would always rent a car and drive and explore a region. I don't know, that's kind of like asking me which one of my dogs I like better. It's, I loved every region that I was at. I think if I had to choose, I would say Emilia-Romagna, which is kind of like northern central, which is where Parma and Bologna are, and I really enjoy the food of that region because it was so centric on fresh pastas, and that's really like a good hobby of mine. But I want to go back and explore more of the South. If I could pick one dish that I remember the most, oh man, Emily, what do you think? Yeah, there were these little cornflake cookies that she can't get her mind off. We sat at this restaurant. We were there, and we got our meal, and it was amazing. And then all of a sudden, they brought these little cookies at the end of our meal. And they had this really interesting texture. And Emily's like, what is that? And I look at it, and it takes me about 15 minutes to figure it out. But I think those are cornflakes. And she goes, no, impossible. They don't have cornflakes in Italy. And I said, I don't know. And so we make it a point to kind of get back into the kitchen before we left. And there was like this big jumbo box of cornflakes up on the shelf. And I said, look, cornflakes, I told you. But I think if I could think of one thing, it wasn't a dish, but it was a ingredient. It was the cured meats that I worked with in Emilia-Romagna. And there's one called culatello. And culatello is just one section of the prosciutto that's aged for up to 24 months. And that, to this day, makes me want to fly back right away.
Yeah, got a question right here.
What is the state of school lunches or the school lunch program in New Orleans?
I would say not very good, if I had to give you a general answer. There are some initiatives now that are helping to improve it. One of them being Liberty's Kitchen, which took over New Orleans College Prep High School and took over their meals. And they actually have a chef in the kitchen preparing the meals and working there. Another one is Edible Schoolyard, where the kids will actually cook their own lunches at times, or most of the produce would come out of the vegetable gardens that the kids tend. Other than those two places, there isn't much going on that I know about. And I've tried hard to research it, and I haven't really been impressed as a city in the direction that we're going, where I know that other cities have bigger initiatives for school lunches. Tons of opportunity there. Yeah, and I would urge anybody that has a good plan for that to get to New Orleans right away and start it up, I think they would be very successful.
Got a question right here.
Actually, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a big goat fan, so where do you source your goat that you
Bill
roast?
Riles, who's from Tylertown, Mississippi.
Okay.
And he raises all of the goats that we use. We have a roasted goat dish on our menu, and he also provides us with all of our goat cheese as well.
Good.
And he's a good man.
Well, we're hoping to join you again. We've been to Dominica, but next month for Tulane's graduation. So,
Oh, awesome!
So I'm going to order the goat this time.
Yes, please do. Please do. It's
And
great.
I think I've eaten in every Besh restaurant in New Orleans except the new one, which is
Born. Yeah.
So we may try that too. But for non-Besh, and practically every restaurant in New Orleans, we've spent a zillion dollars in the last 20 years.
Awesome.
You know. But
Take her lead.
What is your favorite non-famous restaurant to go to?
You know, Emily and I, we love to go eat Vietnamese food in New Orleans. And the Vietnamese population in South Louisiana is very, very strong because of the shrimping industry. And we'll go way out of our way to just go and eat some amazing Vietnamese food. It tends to be cheap. It's always very healthy. And it's the food that I have absolutely no idea how to cook, the way that they cook it. And so, what's that? Yeah, we love Tan Dinh on the West Bank and a place called Nine Roses. And it really depends on what you want to go for. Each place is kind of famous for its own thing. So like the beef pho is at Pho Bang, the steamed fish is at Nine Roses. I could go on for another hour, but that would be off subject. But that's kind of what we like to do. And there's another place for French food called Mo Bar on Rampart Street, right across from Louis Armstrong Park. M-A-U-X, Mo Bar.
Any other questions? Yes, right here.
We're going to New Orleans here in a couple of weeks for our honeymoon, and so we'll come see you.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Is there a food that you absolutely hate, but you have to cook?
Are there any vegetarians in the house? No, I'm just kidding. No, there's not. There are dishes that I don't necessarily like to make. Like, and I don't say, I don't like is strong terms, because I like to make anything that uses good ingredients that people are willing to pay money for. But like, we'll get a lot of really weird requests of people ordering these crazy things at the restaurant that we're more than happy to make, but it's not something that, like, you know, it's not what we designed the restaurant for. But what I find is that you always want to give people what they want, no matter what business you're in. And we go out of our way to make things for people that aren't on the menu, that they specifically ask for, and we do it knowing, because some of our best customers, we've been able to meet them through those situations, because they'll come to Dominica and say, Dominica is the only place that will mix, you know, these 3 ingredients and put it on a pizza for me, and we're happy to do it.
Yes, sir. She's coming with the microphone. Wait a minute. Wait for the mic, please.
Comment on the economic side of restaurant business in New Orleans. How do you price things, and how do you establish and
right now, from an economic standpoint, right now we're stronger than ever for the restaurant business, and our business just at Dominica alone is 23% higher this year than it was last year, and that's a big number. It's a big number. Yeah, pricing is continuously going up, depending, especially on produce prices have risen a lot in the last couple of years since the oil spill which is a whole different lecture, is prices on shrimp and oysters have gone up. And so you try to absorb some of that price rise without having to pass it on to the customer. There's only so far that you can take that before it just doesn't make any sense, and where you have to actually raise some of your prices. Though you can get creative with your menus and say, okay, prices of oysters and shrimp have gone up, but prices of cabbage have gone down. So let me add another cabbage menu item to the menu and take off an oyster menu item, and that way we can kind of keep the prices the same across the board. I think that you'll see, just from gas prices going up the way that they have, that your food prices will go up in most restaurants that you eat at around the country right now.
Well, go ahead, Lon.
And it's not like every time, you know, a barrel of oil rises by 15%, your pizza costs 5 cents more. When we see it as more of a long-term, something that's going to stay around for a while, then that's when you'll actually see prices change. But from a business standpoint, business in New Orleans is stronger than ever. We're continuously breaking records on cover counts at the restaurants and the amount of tourism dollars that are coming through.
Is the fried chicken place back?
Oh, yeah. How many of y'all have been? Willie Mae's. Best fried chicken I've ever had. They also make good fried pork chops, too.
Well, this has been a great presentation, not only on public service, but a person who is making a difference in New Orleans and is shaping New Orleans' future with his restaurants and dream restaurants. And I hope everybody, including the newlyweds and the college graduate parents, go to New Orleans and enjoy a nice dinner at Dominica. Alon, thank you very much.
Thank you.